Hey guys, welcome back to The Generalist. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Today I sat with my good friend, comedian David Foster, hilarious guy. We talked about a lot of stuff at the end of the show in the outro, which is what I call it. I don't know if that's an actual word. I'm pretty sure it's not. I will give you dates for shows that you can go see him that are coming up soon. I'll put up a couple in the show notes as well, and maybe I'll put up some more as the week goes on and more come up. Same as usual, rate us on iTunes, check out our website at thegeneralistpodcast.com, send us an email at thegeneralistpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter at thegeneralistpc, check us out on Instagram at thegeneralistpodcast, check us out on Facebook at the same name. Rate us on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it if you rate us on iTunes. I might have just said that a second ago, but whatever, deal with it. And there's something else. Oh yeah, Amazon link. If you're buying shit on Amazon, which you probably are, and you care to take a couple of minutes to click on the link to our website, it'll be either on the show notes or on the donation page. Shop on Amazon with our link, and we will get I was told not to use the word kickback because it has a negative connotation, but I'm going to use kickback anyway. We will get a kickback from Amazon at no extra cost to you. Other than that, enjoy the show. See you at the end of the news. Welcome to The Generalist, a show with a man who knows very little bit about a lot. A man who specializes in nothing in particular. A man who knows that he knows nothing. A man who can be described as non-specific. And to top it off, he narrates his own intros. This is The Generalist with your host, Saul Ackerman. Is it working?
Is it working?
It's fucking working.
Fucking working.
Sweet. Alright. You hear it, I hear it, everyone hears it.
Yes.
Cool.
I hear.
Levels look good.
Levels. Barbershop.
Alright, welcome to The Generalist. How you doing?
Alright.
You're a comedian.
I am a comedian. And a human being.
Which are one of the two things required to be on this podcast, usually. I've never interviewed an animal.
Never had an animal?
Not as of yet.
Be the shittiest podcast. Are we allowed to curse?
Yeah. You can curse all you want.
We can curse. Because, yeah, I have a filthy mouth.
I wasn't going to make a fucking podcast where I can't curse.
I don't know. I mean,
No. I know that a lot of, the one you were on the other day.
Yeah, so I did, Jill Blakeways, Jill Blakeways is a wonderful friend and an amazingly successful acupuncturist, and, her podcast exists via CBS Network, and I didn't even bother to ask. I just didn't curse. I didn't even go there. I thought of it, it crossed my mind, maybe I should just, ask, and then I realized I was what am I, 22? I could just not curse, I don't have to curse.
Wait, actual CBS?
Yeah, actual, what is it, Central Broadcasting Systems, CBS, the network that was here.
That's pretty crazy. What's her
way
podcast
before
on?
Netflix, CBS, the original Netflix.
Wait.
The original, for all you
OG
millennials
Netflix.
out there, their CBS was way before, generations before.
It was similar, but you couldn't choose what you were going to watch.
Couldn't choose. No, as a matter of fact, you had less choice than you could possibly imagine. There were 4 shows on. You were either watching the football game, the news, or some really shitty sitcom.
Generally.
That was 3 options. Whatever.
What's her podcast on?
What is her, what is it, what do you mean?
What's the...
I don't know. I really don't understand it. I don't know if it, if her medium is, maybe CBS Online? Maybe it's, through their website?
No, I don't mean who's hosting it. I mean, what is she
talking about?
Yeah.
I think she just interviews, people that she's excited about.
Oh, same shit as I'm doing.
Yeah. Thank you, both of you.
Fuck that.
But in her defense, and also to critique her and you simultaneously, this is not a unique concept of approach to podcasts.
No, not at all.
This pretty much is what more or less is what a podcast. There are some podcasts that are just one egomaniacal psycho ranting and raving without any guests.
Let me tell you, my favorite podcast is what you would describe as an egomaniacal ranter.
Okay, so
Well, I wouldn't call him egomaniacal, but still.
No, yeah.
Yeah. So, dude, how'd you get into comedy?
How did I get into comedy?
Yeah.
I quit smoking weed.
What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, right? I didn't grow up a fan of comedy at all.
Really?
Well, no, I didn't, like, grow up, like, the opposite. I wasn't, like, averse to it or anything. I just, I didn't grow up an especially, like, big fan of comedy. Like, you hear a lot of, like, those comedian stories, like, oh, I always loved this guy, and I would sneak into my parents' room and listen to Richard Pryor records and stuff like that. I didn't, no, like, Playboy. That's the only thing I snuck into my dad's room for. I didn't, like, you know, like, pornos.
Is that because your dad only had Playboys and no Richard Pryor?
Well, that might have been the case. Yeah. It was Dad's fault. That's why I didn't get started earlier. No, I think I was such a, like, even though I was a good student, I was such a weed head derelict in high school. Like, I didn't care about anything. Like, I was not passionate about anything except for weed, graffiti, and hip hop, which was, like, in fairness to me, like, that was a cliche. Like, that was a type of person during that time in New York in the early 90s. Like, that wasn't, like, some rare beast of delinquency. It's like, oh, you were one of those, like, hip-hop graffiti skateboarder kids. Like,
yeah,
you know,
were
like,
watching the shows that were doing that, and you were doing what you saw on the shows.
Exactly. So, not that was, like, that weird, but, I mean, I really didn't care about anything outside of that little subculture of interest. And then I was on probation for arson. Nobody got hurt.
But you have to tell that story now because
I blew up a locker in my school with a quarter of a stick of dynamite. It wasn't anybody else's locker. It was an empty locker. It wasn't like
it was my locker, so it's cool.
It wasn't like some like malicious thing against some human being. You're not like suddenly realizing in this podcast like, oh, this guy's an asshole. This is not a redeeming character. Like, this is not the protagonist of this podcast. I don't like him. No, I was a good person. I think relatively I was just a rambunctious teenager.
Coming from Dave, he was a good person. So long as he says it, it's probably true.
That's going to be the quote on my website from me. He's a good person, David Foster. But yeah, we blew up lockers, me and another friend, and we got caught, and they charged us with arson. Like, I mean, we didn't set a fire, and we definitely weren't trying to hurt anybody. Albeit a dangerous thing to do, obviously, that I do not recommend. But anyways, I had to quit smoking weed while I was on probation, and when I did, I had befriended I had become best friends with this dude who had grown up in Greenwich Village as like a childhood actor. And he was really talented, really smart guy, and we became really close, and he was very funny. And when I quit smoking weed, I think I was just looking for something else to do. And he was like, he sort of idolized these guys who did this public access show in Manhattan. This is back in the day before YouTube. Like, having a public access show in Manhattan was a big deal.
I would
like,
imagine.
There was this whole, like, you know, like 15 to, like, 28-year-old, like, subculture of, like, city kids that, like, worshipped, like, a handful of public access shows. Like, that was a real subculture. And if, like, you had a good, you know, and good we're using relatively speaking, but if you had a good public access show, like, you were kind of famous, like, in these little circles downtown
right.
and in Brooklyn and stuff. And so there were these guys that he was, like, peripherally friends with, and he was like, yo, we should do something like this. And he showed it to me, and I thought, like, it looked so cool. Like, I guess I was like 19 at the time, and I was like, oh, that looks so cool. And they looked like guys where it's like, oh, I want to be like those guys. Like, those guys look so cool. And that looks fun, you know? And they were just making, like, comedy sketches, and so we got a video camera, and we started making comedy sketches, and, like, just, like, total, like, basically doing improv, but not live on stage.
So if I moved you, a couple of years later, you would have just been a YouTube kid.
Totally.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we would have had, like, I don't know. I don't even know. What are the kids doing these days? We would have had, like, a Snapchat channel. What are they doing? Whatever they're doing, podcast. We would have had a podcast.
Oh, fuck you.
No, honestly, I should have. I'm not saying...
I totally think you should have
I'm not saying I should have a podcast. That came out wrong. I mean it as, like, it's, like, a to-do that, like, I would like to do.
I actually think it would be awesome for you.
Thanks.
Comedians do great podcasts.
Yeah, there's plenty of them. There's no shortage of
there's really no shortage of comedians doing podcasts. But it's a good medium for you guys.
It is. But anyways, so, like, that was it, pretty much. Like, that was the gateway. Like, we started making these videos, and we made, like, literally about 70 sketches over the course of 2 years. And I fell in love with it. And then stand-up was, like, the next logical. It wasn't necessarily the next logical challenge. Like my friend Eric is his name. He didn't do stand up. But I looked at stand up as the ultimate challenge, and so I was like, oh, I want to try that. And I was horrible at it. And people are like, oh, like the first time? Like, no, the first 40 times.
How long did it take you to like even feel comfortable on stage?
Feel comfortable on stage?
Yeah.
I'll let you know when I get there. It's been 15 years. I'll let you know.
Really? Still?
No, it's a subjective thing. You learn that like pretty quickly. Like you learn somewhere around like your second or third year, like, because you look up one day and you're like, holy shit, so cool. I'm comfortable on stage now. Like I'm really confident. Like this is crazy. And then I swear to God, like, and I think every comedian can, identify with this experience. Like 6 months later, you look up and you're like, oh, now I'm comfortable. Oh, okay. I was not comfortable then.
Oh, so you're always realizing you're more
And
comfortable,
so
not
that-
always thinking you're not, even though you are more.
Yep. And so that keeps happening until you finally reach the point, unless you're a fucking idiot, you finally reach the point where you're like, oh, this is never ending. Okay.
Right.
I get it.
I always feel like comedians are the new philosophers.
Freudian slip. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's not a Freudian slip.
Not
I was getting
Freudian,
there.
but okay. Not that smart. I'm not that smart. I'm maybe.
This is actually false. Actually, factually false.
Yeah, definitely. And so you get to the point. So now I'm probably like 15 years, and I probably have done somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 shows. Probably done about 5,000 or 6,000.
So I've been to a good percentage of them. What's like
You've been to at least
0.3%.
You've been to at least 4 or 5 shows. But
yeah, no, they've all been great.
Thanks, man. They're definitely not all great, but
the ones that I've been to.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? You have friends. I think every comedian has this also. We all have friends. I have certain friends that, like, it's never really great when they're there. And then I have certain friends that, like, I always kill in front of.
So, like, certain friends who think you suck at comedy?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have that with peers, too. Like, every comedian will attest to this. Like, there's certain comedians, fellow comics, when they're in the room where it's like, I always bomb in front of
You just happen to bomb in front of them, or is their presence something that makes you nervous and therefore makes you bomb?
Yeah, you know, there is something to that, but then I can think of, like, other comics that, like, oh, that guy's or that girl's presence makes me nervous, but I still always do good in front of that person. Like, that's a person who I always want to impress, which means since I want to impress them, it must make me a little bit more nervous, a little bit more in my head. Yet, I always come through in this. Like, for some reason,
Well, I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Yeah, no, please.
If somebody who you want to impress walks in, say halfway through your act, will you start doing more bits that you're more comfortable with just because that person walked in, or generally no? You already have a plan before the show.
I've probably done that before. I probably have done that before, but it's a little weird to shift gears because more often than not, what you are doing on stage is your, like, more often than not, like, what you're doing is your relatively new material.
Right.
Which is to say, it's not brand new, so it's not, like, all unrefined. Like, it's refined and becoming more refined, but the thing about doing your relatively new material is that, A, it's probably some of the best material you've ever written because it's coming from the most experienced you've ever been, you know, and it's also something you're the most excited about because it's super fresh. And again, I mean, like, you know, maybe I don't have the clearest perspective of this, but yeah, I mean, I think, like, any bit that I've written in any year was definitely much better than any of the bits I wrote in the year previous to that.
That's good. That shows progress, at least.
But I think that's true for most comics. Until maybe, like, comics, like, hit that weird age of, like, 60, 65, and then, like, they become weird. And it's, like, not to stomp on the grave of a legend because he's amazing, but, like, Carlin sort of at the end, like, took a weird turn where it's like, oh, he regressed a little bit. Like, this is not, like, his last stuff wasn't his best stuff.
I don't remember his last stuff.
It's not his best. And in my opinion, and hopefully this doesn't, like, ruin my entire career, but, like, Chris Rock, I don't think. Like, I think his more recent stuff is not necessarily as good. But he's also, like, you know, he's getting up there. I mean, he's not, like...
That's fair.
You know, he has a huge, amazing body of work, and now he's getting up there. But I think at my stage, like, to a lot of people, 15 years sounds like a really long time in comedy, but usually at the 15-year mark, you're usually still very much progressing. You're very much like, yeah, it'd be unusual not to be.
How do you, and I know this is different for every comedian, but writing comedy is just an insane concept to me. How do you come up with something and go, this is how I make this funny? Because a lot of people experience things that are, I'll think of something and I'll be like, oh, let me tell somebody a story, and I tell somebody a story and I realize I just told the dumbest fucking story ever.
Yeah.
But if you're a comedy writer, which is what I would consider a comedian, somebody who's writing comedy and then reciting it, which is a whole other layer on top of it.
Yeah.
How do you go about figuring out the way to tell that funny situation in a way that will be funny?
Yeah, it's super hard.
Yeah,
I mean, like, I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't know if I'm that good at it. I mean, like
David Foster performing at a club near you.
Yeah. I don't. It's you learn like as you go. I mean, a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is like going on stage and like pressing record on your phone, or back in the day, your voice recorder, you know, and then like listening to it and realizing like, oh, there is no punchlines here. I just remember like one of the guys when I was young that like I so idolized, and like he's just becoming sort of like famous now.
Who's that?
His name's Jay Okerson.
No, I don't know.
Not
that I'm like a super comedy
but
I'm
you
a
would
fairly
enjoy
big
him.
fan.
Yeah, he recently had his 1 hour special, which is like, you know, the pinnacle sort of for us. And I used to watch him on stage, and he used to just tell this like story. It was just like a story of like having sex with a fat girl or something.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to use the word fat. I don't know, because I'm sort of paraphrasing from like his language back then, and you know, I don't know that even necessarily that he'd say it that way now, but he might.
I want to talk about this afterwards, but
but anyways, getting off the incredibly PC boat quickly. He had this story where I was like, man, I used to watch it in awe. I was like, how the fuck does he find like punchlines every 30 seconds? Like, he's just telling like some story that just seems like this totally pedestrian, like just a guy story. It's just like, oh, this sex story or whatever. And I don't know, it's hard. Like, you have to find the beats. You like, a lot of times, like the first time I write something, I'll straight up type it on the computer, and then you have to go over it saying it out loud. Read it out loud. Like, everybody has their own process, but I think this is a pretty common one. Like, first you write it, and then as you read it out loud, you realize, you're like, oh my god, like, this is not funny. But you also get to realize, like, where you can insert, because then you start to hear
right, so that doesn't necessarily mean that's garbage and you're throwing it out. It means, okay, now I need to work on this and work on this and work on this.
Like, you have to find, like, you just have to find the beats. Like, you have to find the beats and the bits. The bits and the beats. Spelled differently, but yeah.
Well, to jump back to the PC shit, because this is a subject that always drives me crazy in some ways, and I get on the other hand. The idea of PC comedy, or of being careful of what you joke about, I'm not a big fan of it, personally. I think we should be able to joke about everything. No,
yeah.
I suppose you wouldn't. But how does that... Do you feel like that's affecting comedy in general right now? Like, between you and your friends and other comedians that you talk about, do you feel like that's a big issue? People being more careful about the type of jokes that are right, or how you guys look at it in general?
I think it's okay. I think, I don't know. I don't think it has ever stood in the way. Like, it's never stopped a comedian from saying something.
No, at least not the good ones.
Yeah.
But there's such a huge, like, shaming culture. Somebody makes a joke. And let's take it to one of the extremes. Somebody will make a rape joke, right? And the whole fucking world will explode, assuming they're a fairly famous comedian. When it's just a joke, he's not actually raping anybody.
Yeah. I think the worst thing is, like, when people jump down the throats of comedians, or I don't even know if that's the proper metaphor, but, you know, like attack comedians for... they say something was a rape joke when it wasn't. Like, he just used the word rape. Like, he referenced rape.
Which is often the case, yeah. It's often not even a rape joke.
It's like, this is not a person making light of rape. You know, it's not...
Yeah, usually it's not. Usually it's not like, oh, and then he raped her. Ha,
yeah,
ha, ha.
But comedy, like, a lot of times is about, like, a punchline. A lot of times is about... absurdity. It's about like a ridiculous example, taking something to the nth degree to really highlight, really exaggerate the stupidity of the situation. Right. And so like we use exaggerated like things like metaphors like murder, Hitler, rape, like things like that, to bring it to that point, to like really like drive home the point, like look how absurd this is. To parallel it, like, look, I can parallel this to rape, and it's like, oh yeah, that is absurd. And then people are like, that was a rape joke. It's like, but that was not a rape joke. Like, I was using the absurdity and atrocity of rape as a parallel, as an analogy.
I think they're doing they're coming out with a documentary now about this. Somebody send me a preview for a documentary about this PC culture in comedy.
I'm sure.
I don't know.
I don't have a I mean, like, it doesn't affect me personally, and it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily like a better comedian at all. But I just I don't really like do jokes about race and shit, because I do think there is like a line of where shock humor is a little bit cheap. Like, I do think like there's a little bit like lost in translation from back in the day. Like back in the day, like, people like couldn't really like, like comics like Lenny Bruce, who was like a legend in the 50s, got like arrested for things he said that like would be very commonplace today.
Which is pretty badass.
Yeah, and he was like a pioneer, and it's like, that's an example of like, no, like we should be able to say these things, and people like Bill Hicks, where it's like, no, these are pioneers. We should be able to like speak as we want. But then it's, I feel, and this is just my personal opinion, like that cliche has like sort of got lost in translation across the generations, and now it's copied and pasted as a defense for comics that like just want to make jokes about handicapped kids or whatever.
Right. See, that I don't like. I sat through a whole show where somebody's entire thing was exactly that.
Yeah.
Just making jokes about.
That's different.
And that to me wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Because you got nothing funny there. You're just trying to shock me.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not shocking. It's just not entertaining. But when you use that as a, I guess, crutch as a not necessarily even as a punchline, but as something that, like you're saying, as a parallel or something like that.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's totally not the same thing.
And so I think a lot of comics do that now, and it's like, oh, I'm going to say like racial slurs, and, but people are like, oh, but we know that comics are liberal, it's okay. They're just like shocking us or whatever. And it's like, like, I mean, anybody can go up there and like, say, I don't know. I'm not going to cite a specific example because like everybody will know exactly what I'm talking about. And it doesn't matter because it's irrelevant to the point. But it's, but yeah, I think there has been like an erroneous copy and paste of that defense over the generations. And don't get me wrong, I'm not about the PC-ness and stuff. Like, I think they're, the PC-ness or the penis. But I'm fine with, gay men. It's fine. Whatever.
that escalated quickly.
I'm not about the penis, but that's fine. Other people are that's totally cool. That's your thing.
You have like
I'm a liberal.
You have like a weird little niche where you make interesting. I haven't seen other comedians that much talk about the stuff that you talk about on stage.
I think that's why I'm such a failure.
Really?
I don't know. I'd like to think. In my most bitter times, it's just that, like, I'm too unique. That's why.
Do you think that's... I can see how being unique could be a detraction, but it could also be a positive. And also, given time, that could entirely switch.
Yeah, sure. What I have going against me is that that every relatively unsuccessful comics thinks the problem is that they're too unique and underrated and too smart. So that I have direly going against me. What I have going for me is that, like, I think let's not say I think you have a pretty good argument that I think my stuff is funny or not, I think it is relatively different. Yes, I think it's unique.
Yeah, you talk about all. Well, regardless. Tell me a little bit about the type of stuff you talk. Well, maybe you shouldn't. People just go.
No, it's fine. No. I can talk. I mean, like, lately I've been very dark.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen your dark comedy in.
Lately I've been pretty dark, but then I have like 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes of material. I think that like after the darkness, where it's like sort of my recommendation of the logic of why no one should ever commit suicide. Which is funny because, people, again, like, that's a good example of people like, oh, man, like, I don't like that suicide joke that you're doing or whatever. And it's not a suicide joke. It is actually completely the opposite. The whole message is why you should never commit suicide, no matter what. That said, like, is addressing suicide for 5 minutes on stage in a comedy club kind of dark? Yeah, that's a little dark. Like, I mean, we're basically discussing suicide from, you know, a very positive perspective, but it's like, oh, all of a sudden, like, you know, the last comic was, like, talking about his date with, like, this chick who he wasn't attracted to, and it's like, okay, like, now we're doing suicide, so that's dark, I guess.
That is pretty dark. I haven't heard you do stuff like that.
And I have a lot of fuck LA stuff now.
How do you feel? So you're originally a New York comic. You lived in LA for a little while, and you just came back.
I did. Yeah.
How do you think Tell me a little bit about the differences between the comedy scenes of New York and LA.
So, I have to be fair to, like, all my LA friends. There is the cliche that, like, you know, LA comedy is so inferior. And it is. But there's a dichotomy to that. And I hope in editing all of that gets included in the final edit.
What you just said?
Yeah.
You got it. It's in. This part of me saying that is in. It's in.
That's cool. But no, there is an enormous dichotomy to that. There are absolutely, like, the ceiling for comics in LA is, for, like, the working comics in LA, the ceiling is just as high. There are great comics out there. The basement is much lower. And I can't stress enough working comics. Like, because obviously new comedians have an equal level basement all across the entire planet. They're all awful.
They just suck when they started.
I mean, they don't know what they're doing, you know, and it's nothing against them. We were all there. So I'm talking about, like, the working, like, regular club comics, the comics who are working the rooms that are desirable, where everybody wants to be, like the sexy hipster rooms where everybody, like, wants to be, and they're, you know, like, really popular. Their ceiling, I would sort of say, is just as high. But their basement is, like, much lower. It's unbelievable. Some of the comedians working the clubs out there are god awful. They're like a time machine back to the early 90s. Their material is incredibly hacky. It's really baffling.
What do you think that is?
It's not as good of a comedy town. And you know, there are plenty of individuals in LA who would say, oh, that's because, like, you couldn't cut it here and you hightail it out of there. I mean, there's no way for anyone to prove it one way or the other, except for the fact that it is common opinion. Like, this is not only me. Like, nobody thinks New York is an inferior comedy town to LA. It's not even close. It's like comparing, like, Biggie and Tupac. It's like Tupac wasn't second best. He was, like, 40th as good.
Well, that went right over my head.
Sorry,
you know
but,
that, right?
I know that, but I had to go there. It's like, you know, like, LA's not even, like, the second best comedy town. It seems like LA has a comedy circuit, incidentally, as a result of it being Hollywood. So, of course, like, we're in Hollywood. Like, this is Hollywood. This has to have a comedy circuit. But relative to the amount of show business that goes on out there, and the amount of opportunities that are out there, and the amount of people out there that really are very talented, it's a very, like, average comedy scene. And it took me a while to, like, really sort of decide that. And so, just for my credibility and for the record, like, I wasn't one of the guys who was out there for, like, 6 months or a year. Like, I was out there every week of 2.5 years. And so, granted, that's not 8 years, but it's a chunk of time. I was out there for 2.5 years. And, I mean, you know, there would be disagreeers, but I think across the country, much more comics would agree with me that,
yeah. Is it very, cliquey is not the word, but do you have to know people to get into the good clubs and stuff
everywhere?
Like that? Also in New York,
Yeah, totally. Here too. I don't know. I mean, like, I thought the comics out there were really friendly. Actually, I found them friendlier than New York comics, and a lot of people.
Surprising.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, like, "Oh, it's fake, like LA fakeness," and it's like, no, it's not. Like, you're calling back to a cliche from, like, the '80s of, like, you know, the Beverly Hills producer and agent that's, like, super fake in your face and stabbing you behind the back. Like, these are people that have no agenda. There's nothing for them to benefit by being fake to you. These are just like, you know, ground level, guerrilla level comics that are grinding it out. Like, it's just a little, like, warmer, no pun intended, you know, to the weather out there. But they're warmer. Warmer.
Thanks for explaining.
They're definitely generally warmer. And there's a million sweethearts on the comedy circuit in New York. But generally speaking, I just found them nicer, yeah.
You like the circuit up here better?
It's no comparison. New York is a live performance town. LA is absolutely a more advantageous place to be for television and film.
Right, of course.
No question about it. Not even close. New York cannot hold its jock in that department. But I'm also sure, even though there is no crossover between the world of Broadway theater and stand-up comedy, like no crossover, like that could never happen. I have this feeling that it's not a coincidence that New York is the mecca of stand-up comedy and also the mecca of Broadway theater. Well, Broadway obviously, but like live theater
in general.
Yeah, there's something about New York that just like lends itself to the live performance more.
It might also be the fact that, and I know that LA. Well, I don't know LA. I know California has more people. I don't know that LA has more people than New York City.
It's weird. It's hard to compare. I think it's like about the same, except the thing in LA is that it's spread out over
that's what I was gonna
so
say.
much more space.
In New York City, and I'll include Brooklyn, the Bronx,
of course,
Queens, all those guys in there.
Yeah.
You have such a huge amount of people in such a small place, and everybody constantly wants to be entertained. And everyone's always stressed out that entertainment feels awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stress in LA. It's also like...
there's a lot of stress everywhere, but...
New York is more of a... New York is also, I think, because of like, we have like 4 or 5 cold months out of every year. It's also like you go out to go in also.
That's true.
Like people in LA, of course, are sitting home watching TV or whatever, but like a lot of times when they go out, they want to like sit on the sidewalks or like go to the beach and like go to the boardwalk, and who can blame them? It's gorgeous. Whereas like in New York, there's 4 or 5 months out of the year where like you go out to go in. You know, like true. I want to go out tonight, but I'm not staying outside. Like I'm not a 24-year-old drug dealer. Like, you know, I'm not standing on the block. Like, you know, I want to go, you know, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely more of a live performance town for sure. It's an interesting thing that, because there's no crossover between those two worlds, but that is something that's an undeniable non-coincidence, you know.
Are there any other towns that are big that have big comedy circuits?
So supposedly like there was like this like supposedly scientific study done like a year or two ago that technically New York isn't number 1. I don't even understand what these idiot scientists like equation was. It doesn't matter. They don't know anything about comedy, and they're wrong objectively. Because it's just impossible. There's no comedy scene like New York, but like by their calculation, Portland was the greatest comedy town. And it's like these like per capita measurements that are all irrelevant.
What were they even fucking measuring?
I don't know. It's something but it's something that's totally immeasurable. Portland's a great comedy town. I mean, there's no way. It's not even close. I don't think they have as many shows as you have in Brooklyn, in one of our boroughs. Let alone the fact that, like, New York has a huge Black and Hispanic comedy circuit. Like, comedy circuit. Not the one black show. Like, there's a whole circuit. We have more Black and Hispanic comedians in New York than Portland has Black and Hispanic people in their city. And now I'm getting on this rant, like, all this to say, like, dude, I totally have love for Portland. I loved Portland when I went there. But that's just a preposterous comparison. But that said, like, they have a nice comedy scene. Seattle, Chicago. Boston's scene, I think, has really fallen off in recent years.
I've only gone to a show in Boston one time, and I don't know what level it was. Somebody took me to a show. It was horrible. That's not good.
Okay, that's interesting, because I was going to say, and as a Yankee fan, I'm a huge Boston hater. I fucking love Boston crowds.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just been
They're great. Yeah, it was an anomaly.
The crowd was small, so that's part of it, probably. You know, I imagine a small crowd kind of hurts the whole thing.
It's hard.
And when I say small, I don't mean like 40 people. I mean like
4 people.
Yeah, like somewhere between 4 and 10 people, right? Or 12 people, something like that. That's those must be tough.
Yeah, they're tough.
Because I feel like the amount of people, and it caps off, I would imagine, gives a certain energy to it.
Gives an energy. It reduces the self-consciousness of the laughters. Laughter is contagious. So is silence.
Yeah, if I watch...
storm of factors.
If I watch a show, like not a show, if I watch a stand-up show on my computer by myself, I find it really funny. I don't usually laugh. Right. But I know that if I was sitting in the club, I'd be dying.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, occasionally, even at home, they say something that makes me lose it.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I just think it's really funny,
That's
but I'm
funny.
not laughing.
That's funny.
So I do think there's an energy to being in the place and
absolutely
all the other people laughing with you.
Yeah, I mean, it is performance art. I mean, like, so, yeah. I mean, so it's fine and great, especially fiscally and business-wise for us, that they put it on TV and make it a part of television culture. But, I mean, it is very much, like, supposed to happen. It's a live performance art, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, just to piggyback, it's just, or not piggyback, just to really quickly go back, Boston crowds are amazing. They're great. And
I can see that.
They're great. They're really smart. They love comedy. They're angry enough for comedy.
The thing that I was thinking.
You know, they're great. They're great crowds, and they produce great comedians. I mean, Louis C.K., Patrice O'Neal, Bill Burr, like, so many great comedians have come out of Boston.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a great comedy town. But, like, the circuit itself in the past 10 years, and this is not even, I don't even know this so much from experience, a little bit going there, but from what I've heard is, like, dramatically inferior to what it used to be. Yeah.
I wonder why. I guess everybody's going to New York or LA.
Yeah, probably. Probably that. That's probably a lot of it. Yeah.
Is there anything to be said for going to a town, and I say town, but I mean city.
Yeah.
Going to a city that doesn't have a very big comedy scene and kind of trying to develop it there.
Is there anything to be said for it? Yeah. I mean, like, I wish I could, like, if only there were, like, 11 days in every week and I can, like, have, like, a fourth job, like, just totally overthrowing the MTA, like, and getting it privatized and, like, totally destroying and taking down the entire subway system. But, like, that's a big project. Like, yeah, you could start a comedy scene in Charleston, West Virginia, but
what I meant by that was, like, say, for example, and I don't know what the scene is like in New Orleans. But
okay.
As an example, going to New Orleans where perhaps the comedy scene is not huge.
It's not.
And starting doing comedy there, because you're saying that, but at the same time you're one of the only people performing at first, so you will be one of the more popular people in New Orleans in that way. Or does it just not work that way because people don't go see comedy there?
No, people definitely. I mean, I'm absolutely as sure as I can be of something that I'm not sure of. I'm sure somebody's doing that right now.
Right.
You know? And you know, we should give New Orleans the benefit of the doubt. It's like, you know, a place like New Orleans. Or places like, you know, let's say like Oklahoma City or something like that. Like, you know, we sound like such New Yorkers. It's like, you know, you could be like, everybody knows you. Like, they're not third world countries, you know? We're such New Yorkers.
But I hear
like,
what you're saying.
You know, you do comedy in New Orleans. Like, aren't you just going to be a star overnight? Like, hey, like, we're part of America here. Like, this is a real city.
I bring up New Orleans all the time because I love New Orleans.
Your girlfriend said, yeah. Well, no, there's definitely something to be said for that. I mean, there have been times, except for the fact that I personally could never regret, like, being from New York, obviously, but, I love being from New York, but I, who doesn't? But there are times where, like, I feel like there were, like, certain comics that got to start for their first few years in another city, that it was, like, really advantageous because A, they got to start and fail under the radar without people seeing them being like this new schmuck who doesn't know what he's doing on stage. And so when they got here, they already, like, when they got on the big stage, which is New York or LA, they already had, like, some chops. And then there's other examples of guys, like, you know, becoming, like, big shit in, like, a small town, and you know, like, the sort of celebrity or quasi-celebrity headliners that pass through all these small towns to headline and make their living, they see them and then, like, they get work from those guys because they really stand out on that show in that town. Whereas, like, you know, big headliners or quasi-headliners come to New York or LA, like, they're not noticing you. You're, like...
Right, you're just some
you're
other...
a dime a dozen.
Exactly.
There's a million of you, you know? And they're not, like... They don't... Yeah.
No.
So no. There's definitely something to be said for doing that, especially if you're originally from there. Please don't move to New York. We're at capacity.
New Orleans needs you.
Yes, stay in Minnesota and form the comedy circuit. Minnesota, incidentally, has a fantastic comedy club out there.
Really?
Yeah, it's like supposedly. I've never been there, but supposedly one of the most, like, quote unquote, the best comedy club in the country.
What?
Yeah, it's just this like amazing.
What's it called?
I always forget the name. I'm the worst. But it's just this amazing, amazing crowd and like this great space, and like it's never not sold out, and yeah. But again, it's somewhere in Minnesota where it's like like not a whole shitload of other distractions. So like people are
and especially
going
if you don't constantly have a comedy circuit. Yeah. Then when a comedian comes, it's like a big
deal.
event,
it's a big deal. Yeah, like a comedy show in New York is now. It's like, hey, like there's a comedy show tonight. Oh, really? Like the one like my friend
there's a comedy show every night everywhere in New York.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Comedy show. Like the one on the block, the other block that I just left.
Who's your favorite comedian?
Louis.
Louis?
Yeah.
Why is that? I mean, that's an easy answer. Everybody loves Louis.
I know. Yeah. All my answers are very cliche. My favorite rapper was Biggie. My favorite movie is The Godfather, and I think they're cliche for good reason.
All right, we're done.
I think there was a time where I was like, oh, it's Louis and Richard Pryor. And for a long time, obviously, before Louis blew up, it was definitely Richard Pryor. But then there was like one 1 hour special, I think probably the most recent one, where I saw Louis do it, and like his body of work is just so huge, and I was just like,
he's unbelievable.
Like I hated to admit it to myself. I was like, I think, and like he probably wouldn't even necessarily take this compliment, but like I was like in my head, if I'm being completely honest, I was like, he's probably got Pryor by a nose. Like it's just like
Pryor has a whole like mythos surrounding him. You can't say that anybody's better than Pryor.
Yeah.
Right?
Like Biggie and like The Godfather.
Yeah.
And stuff. Yeah.
You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah. You're not really allowed to say anybody's better than
But Pryor was great, don't get me wrong.
Oh, he's
I mean, I obviously come from a different perspective where I'm not actually doing the comedy, I'm just watching it.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But
no, he was super brilliant. I don't know, man. Louis he has a remarkably unique perspective that he is able to voice at the highest possible level. And when I say perspective, I think a lot of times like people like confuse that with opinion. It's like, oh, remarkably unique opinion. Like I don't think like necessarily Louis' worldviews or like views of human psychology are necessarily like that radically unique to a lot of other people. I think he seems like an apparent like relatively like educated, liberal, self-aware human being, and fortunately there are many of those. I mean perspective. I mean like his ability, like I guess just like his mental continuum about the human experience is unique to any other that's I think ever been. It's like so dramatically unique to any other comedian.
Yeah, I love Louis. I think he's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm out of questions.
Okay, I should ask you. So, how did you get started with red tank tops? Your tank top matches your bracelet. That's good.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Which is ironic in the context of your outfit, because it doesn't look like a guy who's like, I really want to try to match today. Like, I'm gonna like really.
Nah, you saw me. I walked into my room, grabbed the first thing I found, and threw it on.
That's also what you look like.
Yeah.
But you're looking great also.
I'm partially matching, looking good. Partially, I don't give a shit.
More important how the face looks. It looks great.
Yeah,
the outfit.
Oh yeah, you haven't seen the beard this long.
No, this is the longest I've seen the beard.
That's because this is the longest it's been.
Okay, but it's not much longer than the last time I saw you. It's got like maybe an inch or two.
I think it stops essentially growing too much. It starts curling in on itself. But
well, I'm sure you're aware of what it's doing more than as much
I'm not. That's actually my technique. My technique is don't give a shit about it. Let it do its thing.
It's amazing. It's quite a beard. It's amazing. Where are we? We're in Bed-Stuy, downtown Brooklyn. Wherever we are, we're not in Williamsburg, but you wouldn't know it by Saul's beard.
It's unfortunately it's Fort Greene. I think it's going to be the next Park Slopey kind of place, which is unfortunate.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing should ever be Park Slope. So
even Park Slope shouldn't be Park Slope.
There was so referencing. I love talking about this. I think you'll enjoy this, even though you're not a fan of hip hop as could possibly be. But
let's hear it.
So there is so everybody's aware of like the radical changes in neighborhoods, and it's just funny. From like any like old school hip hop fans' perspective, because territory has always been such a big theme in hip hop culture and in lyrics and stuff like that, and so street credibility has always been aligned with territory and like place of nativity, and so it's interesting like like Harlem, saying Harlem in a rap song doesn't mean the same thing as it did 20 years ago.
Really funny.
But there's a really extreme example. So there's a group that I used to love, a Dominican rap group, or a Hispanic, they're mixed Hispanic rap group named the Beatnuts. And the Beatnuts had a song out in 94. And in 94, like in the early 90s, now Park Slope was never Bed-Stuy or Brownsville, but Park Slope was not what Park Slope is today. Park Slope was shady.
It was Brooklyn.
Yeah, it was Brooklyn, and it wasn't Brooklyn Heights. Like, like in years prior, the only part of Brooklyn that was like this kind of Brooklyn was Brooklyn Heights. Right. Brooklyn Heights was like white people, wealthy. It was always like a really nice neighborhood. Yeah. Other than Brooklyn Heights, the whole rest of it, everything else was super shady. It ranged from shady and sketchy to downright like dangerous, violent warfare. Yeah. So Park Slope was not violent warfare, but it was super sketchy and shady. And so at the beginning of this one Beatnut song is this dude like talking shit at the beginning of the song, like typical rap trap, like yo, yeah, it's the motherfucking lunatic, straight out of Park Slope, buckshot style, or whatever. And I can show you the song.
I need to listen to this song. That's really funny. I never thought about that. As neighborhoods change.
1994. I mean, that means the song was recorded probably in 93. Like, that was a legitimate claim in a rap song.
All his cred is gone.
Yeah. I mean, that guy's also probably like 51 years old now. He's like, whatever, I don't know.
So it's like, so now he sends us in, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in Park Slope.
He's like, thank God I'm in Park Slope. It
turned out to be really good.
Yeah, it was hectic back in the day. It was too much. But yeah,
love in Park Slope
lunatic straight out of Park Slope, buckshot style. That is verbatim. Trust me, I've heard the song a million times, and it's really funny to listen to. Like Harlem, at least, like like for rappers talk about Harlem now, at least it's still like very much still like black culture, and
people still associated with old
school Harlem. Yeah. I mean, we're all aware that it is like 300 to 500% safer than it used to be. Yeah. We're all aware that there's like 300% more white people walking around. That said, there are still a lot of projects in Harlem, and the majority of the streets are obviously still like all black people, and it still is very much black culture. Park Slope is not shady. It is.
It's the exact opposite of shady.
The exact opposite. Yeah, it's funny. Straight out of Park Slope, baby carriage style.
Oh, I can't. Baby carriage.
Baby carriage. Acupuncture for fertility style.
Oh, and Dave, you're an acupuncturist, which I have not mentioned, which is another interesting thing. I imagine there's not a lot of comedian acupuncturists.
No. Yeah, no, there's not.
How does that play into your comedy, does it? I've only one time heard you make jokes that had something to do with acupuncture.
I went through a long phase of just like destroying, like just like attacking, like probably to a little bit of an obtuse degree, like just like blindly attacking Western medicine, which I enjoyed like immensely. It was around 2011. It was about like 5 years ago, 2012, 4 years ago, and I definitely wasn't as good of a comic back then. I think my delivery was a little bit performancy. It was a little bit hokey, not terribly so. I'm being a little hard on myself.
It's the one. I mean, the one that I know that I've seen on your YouTube channel is the one about the drugs with the shoulder pain and the depression and the anxiety.
Yeah,
I love that.
Thanks, man.
So you see it that way. I didn't see that at all, that it was hokey or performancy.
I mean, I definitely had some success with it. Like, that material definitely, like, got me a bunch of things. Like,
I've even quoted that material in conversation.
Thanks. Yeah. You know what I'm an ironic victim of? I'm a victim of what a fucking joke Western pharmaceuticals have become. Because what it did, it's become such a fucking joke, like, even to lay people who aren't even as, like, holistically educated as, like, you and me are. It's become such a joke that it's a little bit hacky.
Right. It's no longer your material. It's something that everyone's talking about.
Yeah, it's like everybody does. I mean, I actually saw a comment on one of my YouTube videos, and you should never read the comments on your YouTube videos.
I can't tell you that.
You should never do that, but, sometimes you can't help yourself when you're in a state of morbid boredom and depression stuff.
Yeah, I just put this podcast on YouTube. I'm excited to see what happens.
But yeah, there's one comment where this kid wrote, I say kid, who knows?
One assumes.
Yeah, this kid wrote, oh, yeah, like, jokes about pharmaceuticals, kind of overdone, wouldn't you say? or whatever, and I was like,
I'm an acupuncturist, fucker.
First of all, I'm an acupuncturist. I studied holistic medicine. I got a master's degree in it, and like, not when I wrote it, it wasn't. Yeah. But
dude, that joke has a master's degree behind it.
Yeah, that is fucking informed. I'm not just some whiny comedian up there. But and also then in that critic's defense, like there is something to be said for like things like if there's any void of timelessness to a bit. Yeah. Then, like, maybe you could do better. That's true. So, I mean, I was really proud of that bit, and I am really proud of that bit.
I still really like that bit.
Thanks.
Yeah. I also really like you have a skit that you did. The two doctors selling drugs on the corner.
I think that's kind of timeless.
I love
if
that.
I do say so.
Yeah, I'll put a link on the show notes to your YouTube channel. But
yeah, that one's
I love that one.
Yeah. People are big fans of that. It was funny. I hated it when we first made it.
Really, it's so good.
Like when we were making it, I was like, "This is garbage. Like this sucks. This is not good."
Why didn't you like it?
It just didn't seem like it was going to be laugh out loud funny. It seemed like just a classic case of like, oh, this is like a clever enough premise, and like it's a good point that we're making or whatever, but it's just not laugh out loud funny. And people like really loved it, and that was actually the case with a couple of my other skits. I think a couple of the other skits that I thought were really funny, and then like over time, like I think I've like realized like with like like people's opinions who I really respect have kindly told me like, yeah, no, I'm not really that into that one.
Does that happen often, where the ones you think are just like not so good end up being really good, and the ones that you think that are really good just?
I don't know. I haven't made that many skits. Like, it was only, like, that 1 year in our last year of school together that, like, I had, like money from student loans, and I was, like, making a push for my YouTube channel, and, like, I made a bunch of skits. So I haven't made enough to be able to say that.
Oh, yeah? Did you like the whole doing skits things, or?
Yeah, I love it. It's just, like, really hard.
Yeah, I imagine. Time-consuming.
It's hard.
Just editing this podcast is a pain in the ass. I can't imagine what editing a video is like.
It's so hard. It sucks. It's just, like... It makes you, like, so angry and bitter as a comic because you look at, like, things like Saturday Night Live or, like, people that are, like, getting paid big money to do it. Not that Saturday Night Live people are notoriously underpaid. That's a bad example. But a lot of, like, TV variety shows. And it's like, oh, like, they don't have another job. Like, this is all they have to do. And It's like, it's making them, like, famous, and they're getting paid for this, and there's somebody who has the job editor, there's somebody who has the job producer.
Right, it's a total.
It's like it's not to say their job is easy. It's definitely hard to do what they're doing, but
they're just doing
not
the
nearly
part.
As hard. It's just
when you're doing the whole thing yourself.
It's not even close. Yeah.
Although a lot of people have gotten even shows doing it, like
absolutely, that's why I was doing it. Absolutely, yeah. No, that was the goal, and it still is. It's just right now I'm broke, and I can't produce any sketches.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I guess you don't have a camera and stuff. You have to rent and all that shit.
I have a camera, but nowadays it's not good enough. It used to be good enough. 10 years ago, it was a good camera.
Happening now.
Yeah. 10 years ago, mine was a good camera. Now it's like supposedly not even adequate to like film my sets in the fucking comedy club. Like,
is it analog?
Yeah, people are like, no, it's digital. No. It's digital, but now people are like, it's like
now you have to have like a 1080p
def, like,
3D camera.
Yeah, people are like,
you need to be able to do the Matrix turn.
Yeah, people are like, oh, that's a great set that you got there. Can you get like a better quality camera? Like, no, because I'm a broke comedian. Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah, that happens with a lot of things these days. You always need more money to do anything.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, give us more money so you could show us how you do in this. It's like, I can't fucking afford it. That's why I'm asking for a fucking job.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, people are like, oh, like, can you, like, when we're trying to get into comedy clubs to get regular work there, they're like, oh, like, well, have you done any late night? Have you done, like, Conan or, like, Letterman or whatever? And it's like, oh, no, you guys hold the auditions here. So, well, you can't work this club if you don't have any, like, late night credits. But I can't get any late night credits if I don't work this club.
So what happens if you say yes?
If you say, like, that you have?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, totally.
Nah, they want to see the
tape. Do one with your camera. Green screen David Letterman in the background.
Yeah, that'd be funny. That would be great.
That would actually be really funny. Like, clearly make it fake. And then they're like, oh, do you have any? Yeah, totally. And you give them the tape, and it's very clearly fake, and you not being there. I wonder if that would work.
No, it wouldn't. But
are they very serious about this stuff?
Well, I mean, like bookers, in fairness to club bookers and stuff, they usually actually do watch tapes. But like agents and stuff, like never watch tapes. Like so notoriously so that like I heard this one comedian once, like when like this is before we were sending like emails, when we were still sending like DVDs out of our stuff, like send a DVD out. He's like, I'm so sure that they don't like watch the whole tape. And so, like, the first 2 minutes, he did stand-up, and then, like, the last 8 minutes of the tape was just him jerking off on tape.
And nobody ever said anything.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a crime. Like, that's illegal.
Actually, I don't think it's... I know in the state of New York, it's... Oh, I don't know if this is New York. In general, it's allowed... You're allowed to tape... You can't pay for sex, for example. Obviously, it's prostitution here.
Sure.
But if you film it and put it out, then it's pornography. And then it's legal.
Oh, shit.
You could pay somebody for...
Wow, my brain really just thought for a second, like, I should get a hooker.
It's like, holy shit. I have a camera already.
That sucks. And
yeah, I wouldn't just because of all the editing.
What's that?
I wouldn't just because of all the editing.
Wouldn't what?
Get a hooker.
Oh, yeah, that's such a pain in the ass. Yeah. Nah.
You don't have the money to produce that right now.
Yeah. No, for the record, I'm not interested in any prostitutes. But if I'm being completely honest, like the still 14-year-old boy that I believe exists to some degree in every man's head, like that knee-jerk reaction in my brain was like, oh, cool. And then like a second later, I was like, oh, I don't fuck whores.
Yeah.
But like there was a split second where I was like, oh yeah, cool.
Well, I think it's probably more having to do with just like, oh, there's a way to break a rule.
Yeah.
More than I want a prostitute right now.
No. It was sex.
Well, yeah, that plays a good role in it too.
Yeah, but whatever. But I'm not doing it. For the record, it's not happening.
But if it were, you can find it on YouPorn.
Yeah, right. David Foster comedy /porn. No, it'll be on my YouTube channel. Forget YouPorn. It'll be on my YouTube channel.
David Foster comedy.
And then I'll submit that 5 minutes to the next comedy festival. I'll submit. Hey, what do you guys think of this?
So you send those things. You send those CDs to the clips to the agents.
Yeah.
For them to become your agent?
Yeah.
So they just go like, based on what, watching like a couple of minutes of it, they're just like, yeah, we'll take that guy?
Usually not. Like, most of the time, unsolicited emails probably just get deleted. I think once in a blue, they watch.
Oh, so usually they reach out to you? Or they see you at a club or something?
Yeah, usually they see you at a club. The best way, I think, to get good representation is somebody actually seeing you live. And then the second best way is a strong referral by a comedian friend who's already represented by them, and then they might watch your clips. But a distant third place to those two is the unsolicited email.
Do the agents tend to be, in your opinion, and maybe you're not allowed to answer this because it would be bad for your career, but do they tend to be good critics of comedy or not really?
I don't, I think no, because none of the great ones want to represent me. So so of course I'm going to think, I have to think no.
I like that you at least are aware of that.
Yeah, of course. But the most fair, intelligent answer is that I don't personally know enough of them to really even answer that question. I don't know.
That's fair.
Yeah, agents keep themselves very separate from us until they don't, until they're married to us, until they're married to one of us, until we're in a relationship, partnership with an agent. But before that, comedians, it's we're in each other's world the whole time. I know all the comedians. They know me. We all know each other, and we know our opinions of one another. And, it's like a fraternity. Not really a fraternity. I mean, there are little fraternities within it. But it's some class that you went to school with since elementary school. You know these kids since 4th grade, and now you're in 12th grade together kind of thing. So, comedians all know each other. But the agents don't move and shake around in that world. We don't know them. They don't know us until they want to. So I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think so. I think it's a weird thing because you can't educate in it. So
Right.
I don't know that they could necessarily have an opinion that's necessarily superior or more educated than any other layperson on the planet. Except for the fact, the one thing that they have a more informed opinion about, like, what the networks and casting directors are looking for.
That's true. That makes sense.
That they obviously do have, even if they are completely, like, of average intelligence. They know that better even than I do, you know, So, you know, that's me being, like, super zen and diplomatic, where it's like, I can't be mad at them, like, you know, like, their job is just to find...
Right, they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. And, you know, so I'm not that for now. I'm not what they're looking for.
One more question, and then I'll let you promote yourself. I assume very often when you tell people that you're a comedian when you first meet them, not all the time, most smart people, I don't want to say smart people, most people who have common operational sense will not ask you to tell them a joke.
Tell a joke, yeah.
How often does that happen?
Yeah. It doesn't happen often, but it's happened a ton of times.
What's your favorite response to that?
Oh, no, I don't know. Like, I'm 38 years old. I'm really tired. I'm pretty sure I have some degree of adrenal fatigue, and so I don't have a good, like,
I thought that was your response.
So,
that's a good response. I'm 38. I have adrenal fatigue. I don't want to do a fucking joke right now.
That would be a great response. So all that to say, my usual answer is, oh no, I'm sorry, we don't do that. You know, like, sometimes I'll be like, I think, like, at my jerkiest, I'll be like, oh no, you know, like, in more of, like, a direct, like, somewhat condescending way. But most of the, I mean, I'm a pretty nice guy. Most of the time, like, I really...
That's the second time you said that.
No, is that what I said? Really?
Didn't you say that earlier?
I'm a good person.
Right when we were talking about the about the blowing up a locker, you're like, but I'm a good person.
Yeah. I think most of the time it's like a super polite, like, oh, like, no, I'm sorry, like, we don't really do that, and, like, I sort of, like, laugh, like, you know, like, no, we don't really do that, which is, I think, much nicer than what most comedians respond. It's horrible. It's actually, like, even though it is the biggest cliche that we all hate on people for doing that, and criticize people for doing that, but it's actually not a horrible request to a particular style of comedian, to, like, the dry...
To the joke tellers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. To the joke teller, to the dry one-liner joke teller.
That's fair.
In fairness to that comedian, like, even he or she does not want to do that.
Of course.
Because it's so out of context and awkward, but it is doable. For me, it is completely impossible.
Right. Of course it is.
It's like, it doesn't... It's hard to figure out the perfect analogy, like, but,
It's like somebody stopping me on the street and saying, hey, you do acupuncture? Yeah. Oh, can you needle me right now? No, not even. That's not even.
It's not even, because, like, we totally could
needle
them. Like, we totally could, like, But yeah, I know, because I've tried to, like, every comedian has tried to think of, like, a million analogies, but it's just this really, like, subtle sort of intangible thing where it's like, like, it doesn't work. Like, we can't really do that, you know?
So I lied to you. I told you I wasn't going to ask you another question, but I like asking this now.
Yeah.
Completely out of the blue. But do you have, like, a personal philosophy of life? And that could mean a particular way of being, what you think the universe is, what, like, it could be anything. I know that's like that's from us joking about bullshit to being like, hey, what do you think about the world? You're allowed to say no.
I think I have, like, a yin and yang answer.
I like that. Let's hear it.
I think, and we won't get into this, but we can have, like, maybe revisit another time and, like, discuss, like, social issues and interpersonal issues.
Oh, I would love to.
But one of the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life, or the biggest regret I have, and people who don't have any regrets, well, fuck you. Because I don't know what kind of, like, either pretentious wavelength you're on, or what kind of perfect life you've lived, but it has to be one or the other if you really don't have any regrets. So the biggest regret that I have was an enormous bridge that I pretty single-handedly burned between two old friends, two best friends that I had, which I think I've mentioned to you in passing. And I wasn't entirely culpable, but I was mostly culpable. And so I think my yin response, and it's so cliche, but is one of love. It was like really like in the last couple of years in our school time together was like the first time in a while that I really had like really good friends like yourself. Again, and then when I was in LA, it took me like a year or so, really almost every bit of 2 years before I really had like friends that I really loved again.
Right.
And I think it's like bar none, like just so far and away the most important thing in the world.
Right.
And so I think like within that is a lot of like humility and vulnerability, which is like can be really hard to have for guys. It can be really hard to have for young people, like people in their teens and early 20s and mid 20s, and depending whenever you mature, you know. But I'm happy to say it's no longer hard for me. I mean, I'm 38, but it's not. And so realizing I almost had a falling out with another old friend actually while I was in LA, but it was a friend from New York. And I finally reached out to her with like super, and it wasn't contrived. It wasn't dishonest, like super duper, like vulnerable humility and like self-awareness of the situation. And just like bottom lining it with like, hey, what can we do to like, I want you as a friend. You know, right. Because like, and you know, like maybe I wasn't even as wrong as you think I was, and maybe like, but maybe I probably still was wrong, and for what I was, I'm sorry, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, we don't have to really configure out like, what would we rather have? Like, you know, like, what if it's impossible to configure the exact degree of wrongness of like how wrong I was? What if that's impossible to fully agree upon? Is that worth losing a friendship over?
Right.
And so that's my yin thing, and my yang thing is discipline. Is definitely like I don't think I'm not at this point in my life a believer that anyone should necessarily like fully abstain from enjoyment of sorts. I like alcohol. I've never really been any sort of an alcoholic. Like I've definitely always been fortunate to like enjoy it in moderation.
I spent a lot of time with you and I've never seen you drink in excess.
Right. You probably have, but you were probably drinking in excess.
That's certainly
I
possible.
remember this one party in Brooklyn a few years ago where we were like drinking Jack Daniels from the bottle, and that is an extraordinarily rare occasion for me. But like, I will do it. I definitely believe, like right now, for example, I'm like 5 days gluten free, and you know a lot of people obviously have an aversion to these. They're like, oh, you know, cliche gluten free. It's like but it's always, I have a very severe gout condition that is genetic in my family, and right now like I'm just in a place where I'm like, I think you should be always open to exploring, experimenting with like abstaining from anything. And Chinese medicine, as you and I both know, doesn't condone vegetarianism. At all. It very much condones eating meat, but that doesn't mean like it's not like there's nothing wrong with like seeing how your body reacts to like a year without meat, or like,
of course,
just because gluten-free is like is a corny fad for a lot of corny people doesn't mean it doesn't have like potential wonderful benefits, because gluten is, I mean, scientifically inflammatory. Whether there's such a thing as a gluten allergy or not, we know that it's inflammatory. That's science. It is inflammatory. So if you're dealing with inflammation, like, it's totally worth it to experiment with it. And I think having that like healthy balance of you know, like definitely like enjoying life or whatever, but I think discipline is vital. I think like, you know, like it's like stretching, like when we stretch in yoga, or when we stretch like just like sitting down, it's like, don't hurt yourself, but push yourself.
Right.
You know, like, don't make life miserable, but don't just fucking do whatever you want to do. You know, because that's definitely not what we're here for, because we see the outcome of that, you know?
I could probably take some of that advice from you.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any shows coming up? This show will probably be released not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after.
Oh, goodness.
If you don't have any shows lined up yet, I'll just... Because I record the intro and outro right before I put it out.
Oh, cool.
So you can just tell me what shows you have up, and I'll make sure I get those on.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. No, I don't. I actually have a couple shows in the next couple weeks, like while this will be running. But as for the week or two after that, nothing comes to mind right now. So yeah.
All right. I'm sure you'll have them anyway. Cool. Yes. So yeah. Let's call it.
Cool. That is awesome.
Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
How the fuck do I stop this? There we go.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening. All the same stuff that we said at the beginning, but I just want to promote Dave's stuff real quick. Check out his comedy blog at davidfostercomedyblog.com. Check out his YouTube channel, which there will be a link to on the show notes. And this Thursday, as in Thursday what's today, the 2nd? So Thursday the 4th of August, Dave will be doing a set at the 10 o'clock show Thursday. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that was complete. Okay, we need to restart because that's just wrong. You know what? Fuck it. I'm not restarting it. We're just going to go ahead and do it. It's not this Thursday. It's the following Thursday, 8/11, in Long Island City, Queens, at the Creek and Cave. It's called the Creek and Cave. All right. Wow. That whole outro is a little pathetic. But okay, well, you got it. Creek and Cave, 8/11, 10 o'clock show. 8/11 is not the time. It's the date. And, yeah. Thank you so much for listening. All the stuff I said at the beginning, Amazon link, Twitter, all that garbage. You know how it works. We'd love it if you donated to the show, but if not, just enjoy, listen. We appreciate you listening. And have a good week. See you in 2 weeks. We'll see what we do. Maybe I'll release. I'm talking too much for this outro thing. We'll see. I'll put it on the website what I'm going to release next one. Thanks for listening.